Hello, folks. My name is Alicia. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm with the Newburgh LGBTQ Center. And the Less is More Act is a bill that not only I support, but the organization supports. As somebody who is formerly incarcerated, the having this bill in effect, even though it doesn't directly affect me, it affects a lot of my loved ones. In particular about like how people are violated on parole for practically nothing. And that affects people every single day who come home or on parole and have to deal with all the disparities of the struggling that comes home. I know that when I'm going to hit 5 years this year. I can't believe it gone that fast, but I'm about to getting a job, getting housing, and having to worry about, on top of the restrictions that parole puts you, and having this bill be put into effect, and how we're pushing for there even to be more changes within parole. So being, that we're here today to listen to folks, and we're here to educate about the bill and what we can do, so we know that for people that are on parole that are faced by these situations of parole officers who tend to violate people for trying to get a job, and meaningless violations, to provide that resource and to provide that information. And I am happy to be being the host, the moderator, whatever we want to call it, and working with Less is More and Exodus, and Little Bit of Light. I am a graduate of the Exodus program. I see some folks who are there. I'm looking forward to just building community with all of you and having all of us in space so we can learn together. And so I'm going to pass it off to Kendra at Exodus.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kendra Clark. I'm the Vice President of Policy and Strategy with Exodus Transitional Community. We're a preventative reentry and advocacy org with main locations in East Harlem, New York City, but we also have upstate sites in Hudson Valley, Poughkeepsie, and Newburgh. Out of our almost 300 staff, 80% of us are justice impacted. So I myself, am formerly incarcerated and experienced parole as well, and think through all the different issues that I had experienced myself on parole and how Less is More would have helped me personally, but then also how it impacts all of our participants that we serve and a lot of our staff as well who are still on parole. And really just I'm happy to be here in community with folks, as Alicia said, to really just educate people, answer questions that folks may have. We fought for Less is More for a long time, and we're really excited that it is now law. And just, walking you through some of the dates where certain pieces of the law go into effect as well, right? So really happy to be here, and thank you. And I will pass it over to Anthony.
Hello, my name is Anthony Mond. I'm a member of Katal Center. I am also on New York State parole. I've also dealt with the punitive nature of violations. And I'm just happy to be here to be able to present to you today. And I will pass it on to Melanie.
Thank you, Anthony. And my name's Melanie. I am the senior community organizer with the Katal Center. And we do work in both New York and Connecticut. And we're a community organization that works to strengthen the people, policies, and institutions and movements that advance equity, health, and justice for everyone. And we actually have 3 interrelated goals. The first one is ending mass criminalization, mass incarceration, and the war on drugs. And the other one is advancing evidence-based solutions that promote both health and equity, and then also building the leadership and organizing capacity of neighborhood residents, organizers, and advocates to effectively drive and shape real change, which is how we have Anthony in this space, who has been working on Less is More for over a year now. And so like we all know that power comes in two folds: organized people and organized money. And organized people will always be organized money. And that's what we saw with the Less is More New York campaign, which was first introduced in 2018. And we've been doing this work alongside our executive coalition, which is Unchained and A Little Piece of Light. But then as well, like with Exodus, like they've all been part of this campaign with the Newburgh LGBTQ Center, like all these other organizations made us get to the point that we are right now, where we have less is more as law currently. And so I'm going to pass it over to AJ to introduce themselves as well.
Hey, it's AJ. Hi, everybody. A Little Piece of Light. She, her pronoun. Thank you, Melody. I'm here to represent A Little Piece of Light. I had my teammates struggling to get on. I don't know. I sent them the link. I'm gonna resend it to them. Just here to do the work. Hey, Kendra.
I'm still letting people in too.
It's a good turnout. It's lovely to see you all here. And I guess we can get started with just like talking a little bit about, you know, what the experiences have been with the parole system prior to Less is More being implemented. And I'm gonna pass it over to Anthony to kind of lead that conversation.
Get a good idea how parole used to work was people get out on parole. More than likely they had to double up on their programming, which is very tough on somebody, especially being culturally shocked going into prison and then also being shocked coming out. The nature of parole is very punishing. They weren't given very many chances to people to really come out and make a difference in their own life, make a difference in their family's life, and ultimately, you know, lead a law-abiding life and a productive life. And another thing they would do is they would send people away for drug treatment to prison. And they, in 2018, they sent almost 1,700 people just for drug treatment to a New York State correctional facility, to a place that is really known to cause mental illness and helps drug addiction really take place in a person. A lot of addiction is related to mental illness, mental health issues. So a lot of their problems just took the back seat and waited for them to get out, and problems would keep going over and over and over. And parole would sentence people to 12, 24, 36 months. 36 months for just a parole violation, a dirty urine, late curfew. And it was costing the state of New York $680 million to house all of these people for technical parole violations that, you know, a lot of problems can be taken care of on the street. And this is where we do our best learning, right? It's not in the classroom. It's really as we go, you know, trial and error. So it was just a pretty tough system. And I'm just really glad a new system comes in and it allows people to get the chances they need to succeed out here. And also this bill helps get these people the tools they need also to succeed in life. Also, there's like still almost 4,000 people incarcerated for these non-criminal technical parole violations. So we're hoping that Kathy Hochul implements all of these quickly, gets people on their way. Up to 8,000 people are due to get off of parole in the next few months, which is another good thing. It allows parole officers to be less tied up and more or less being able to be more committed to everybody else that are still struggling. I'd like to just pass it back.
Thank you, Anthony, for that. And just like highlighting those really important statistics that really go to show like how the parole system has been functioning in the state of New York. And adding on to it, like in 2019, of the people who were on parole and were sent back to prison, over 85% of them were reincarcerated for a technical parole violation, like missing curfew, being late for an appointment with the parole officers, things of that nature. And I wanted to pass it over to Kendra or AJ to just add on to this, or just like things that they've heard or like experiences that they've seen of people who've been on parole and treated so poorly by the system.
Yeah, so I'll start first and then I'll pass over to AJ. So when we heard about less is more, it was common sense, right? For us, because traditionally we see people get violated for non-criminal technical violations all the time, right? And in New York City, if you're using like the MTA, for example, they're never on time. So you might have a curfew that's 7 p.m., but the train just delayed you and now you're getting home at 8 and now you're in violation if your parole officer came and was trying to find you. And what would traditionally happen is they would arrest you. They would put you in jail and then hold you for days, right? Sometimes over 100 days. In fact, most often it's over 100 days before you would even get a hearing. So now now that person's not able to work. They're not able to support their family. They lose their housing, and it's all over a missed curfew. So it's all over something that is not even a law, like it's not even a crime. It is a technical violation. So for us, it was just common sense to sign on to less is more. I think traditionally, throughout these last 10 years that I've really been working in reentry, I have seen one of the stories I always talk about is actually from Westchester. I was in a jail in Westchester and I was doing a tour of the facility and they let me go into the LGBTQAI unit and I was speaking with a trans woman. She got an 18-month violation for something that was a technical violation. She got 18 months sent back upstate to a men's facility. And so I stayed in contact with her. And I think what was even more eye-opening and harder was the state doesn't recognize the name that you recognize. So like I consider her a her, so that's how she considers herself. She's a trans woman. But I had to use her government name when I was writing to her. And that was even like an extra traumatic experience for her as well. Like, even when you're getting nice letters, it's still not addressed really to the name that you wanted to. And that was per her request because upstate, a lot of times they give you a lot of crap around that. And they said they wouldn't even, she most likely thought that they would not even give the letters to her if they were addressed in her name that she preferred, right? So I think of all the damage and trauma that we put folks back through by re-incarcerating them for technical violations. And this happens all the time. Maybe a month and a half ago, I had a young woman who was violated because of a failure to report. And we had to pull a lot of strings to get her released. And in my head, I'm like, this is less is more. I shouldn't have to be calling 20,000 people and the highest level of person at docs to try to get somebody released for something that was clearly a violation. And so we see that kind of across the board, and it's very similar with drugs and alcohol as well. And I really want to thank the gentleman Anthony that spoke before around, addressing the root causes of incarceration. The way that the system is set up, it's not set up to do that. If someone is experiencing a substance use issue, we should help them try to address that, not incarcerate them and traumatize them even further. So, less is more. There's a couple different pieces of legislation that is in the bill. One of them is also the earned time credit. So while you're on parole, every 30 days that you don't receive any violations, you get 30 days of good time at taken off your parole. So you could actually cut your parole time in half through part of what is in less is more as well. So there's 4 different kind of main steps that we're going to go through with folks once we get to that piece. And I think that's kind of like the nitty gritty of what we can do. And I just want to also state that we understand very like intimately that it is much more difficult to deal with parole upstate than it is like in New York City, for example. So it's a lot easier here to navigate the parole officers and be able to kind of get people released. We know that in Hudson Valley and all the way upstate, everywhere upstate, there's going to be a lot of education and that's going to be needed for the parole officers. And it's definitely going to be like, I know what it is to be on parole, and I know what it is where you don't want to make waves with your parole officer because we know what the system is, right? So we also want to help folks, especially who are upstate, navigate and balance this, because we don't want to inadvertently, you know, create a target on your back that now your parole officer is like, you know. So we just want to make sure that we're kind of helping you strategically through processes, and you can reach out to any of us too moving forward if you run into something very specific that was a less is more violation, where you need help advocating for yourself, and to do it in a way that's not going to give you a lot of backlash on that end. So I just want to make that very clear too, that as someone who lives in New York City, I'm very intimately understanding of how much more challenging it is when you're upstate. And that's why I'm so happy to have so many of the providers from upstate on the phone, including our teams at Exodus that are upstate. And I'll pass it over to AJ.
Hey, thank you, Kendra. You know, I was listening to you. I was like, well, what do I say after that? You know, very informative. But, you know, I must say, you know, I had my own personal experience too with the parole justice system. I've been out yesterday, made 24 years. I made 24 years yesterday out here. And let me tell you something, being out here for 24 years, you know, when I first came out and was on parole, right? That wasn't my first parole. Let me share that, right? I've been on parole twice prior to this, right? But my impact came from because I'm that individual who had a drug abuse system abuse problem, right? So there was resources. The problem with the resources that was there, the parole officer didn't even let me know about the resources, right? So that's the issue within itself that we have still today with parole officers who's still trying to take the less is more bill and make it seem as if we're trying to release criminal convicted felons and whatever, but that's not the case. So what I see today as the less is more bill is needed, is a great impact today, you know, to help the families, because we talking about families, because families is impacted, right? When our brothers or sisters or mothers is going to jail for little violations. All my violations, I'm gonna be honest with you, right, was because dirty urine, right? I didn't have a criminal justice issue, issue, right? I had a drug problem. I could not stop using, and they did not give me no outlet, right? They didn't provide me with no kind of outlet to go to address the issue. Basically, what happened is they didn't acknowledge it. They didn't even acknowledge I had a drug problem, you know? And this is what they do today, right? They do not acknowledge that there's underlying mental health issues, right? These issues extend from childhood. I could say that about me because a lot of you're gonna hear me always share when I'm on this personal experience, right? And that's why I know less is more bill is needed, right? I've been molested at the age of 6. Last year, after 52 years, I decided to talk about it. It impacted me for 52 years. You know, that was a great impact. You talk about using drugs, right, to get out of the fear and pain. And this is what's going on today. Like, because if I'm not gonna say we, if the government, the mayor, continue to sweep everything on the rug and not acknowledge that, like, is evidence that we have a major crisis in mental health, a major crisis here in New York in mental health, is why, you know what I mean, these crimes is continuing to be committed. It's not who they are, but it's who they become through using drugs, molestation, trauma impacted, and I say trauma impacted as well because I watched my mama be abused by her husband every weekend. As a little girl, the only kid in the house, I was traumatized behind it. I didn't know how to deal with it. So when I went outside, the only thing I knew what to do to put a smile on my face and be with friends that smoked weed and made me laugh, dealt with acid, you know, it just took me out of my pain, right? So as I got older again, you know, the criminal justice system don't see that. And the reason why they don't see it because they don't ask. Why they don't ask? It's designed for us to fail. It is designed for us to fail, especially the Black and brown community. It's designed for us to fail. So the lessons, I'm gonna go into the lessons more bill, right? It is so needed, right? But let me say this. I am glad March 1st, woo-hoo, right? A lot of people was released, right? So the work that was put in has paid off, but we still have a road ahead of us because we need to come together collectively like we, but I feel like correctional officers, not correctional officers, parole officers need to be able to come to us collectively to better understand what the less is more bill is really about, opposed to having their own narrative about it. We are not here to talk about release criminal people. We talk about release people that's been violated, and let's know the difference between violations and crime, right? Let's know the difference, right? So it's like, all right, say I'm driving my car, I'm gonna give you this narrative. Driving my car, police pull me over, right? They give me a ticket, right? For DUI, right? That's a crime, right? But they give me a ticket for running a stoplight. That's a violation, right? So with a violation, not stopping at a red light, I don't go to jail, I just get a ticket. But for DUI, I go to jail because it's a crime, right? So it's the same thing. So why is it that, you know what I mean, the criminal justice system that the governor has designed for us to go to jail just because we picked up a drug? Just because we picked up a drug, just because we didn't make it home 15 minutes before our curfew. But there's parole officers that will violate you for 15 minutes. For 15 minutes. So yes, this lesson more bill is greatly needed, and I will continue to fight the cause. I will continue to be the voice for many that cannot speak for themselves today. And I'm glad I'm here. I thank everybody that's on the platform on the meeting today to support the less is more bill. And if we can continue to add more people and get more people out, so this is an info session so they can understand what it's about, so we could get more people to come in these meetings and then fight with us. Thank you.
Hey, Jay, I just gotta say thank you so much for speaking your truth. So much love for you. And you brought up so many important points right there, like you know, how it disproportionately, how the parole system has disproportionately impacted the Black and brown community. In New York City, for the longest, Black people were 5 times more likely to be re-incarcerated for a technical parole violation than their white counterparts. And this is across the state, right? And then once you bring it down to New York City, Black people are 12 times more likely to be re-incarcerated for a technical parole violation. That is horrifying to see. And, you know, that's just one of the many reasons why we have been needing something like less is more. And going back to the substance abuse disorder and all of that, like there is a universal agreement among health providers that incarceration, it does not offer any type of rehabilitation for folks that are dealing with a mental health problem, for folks that are dealing with a substance abuse disorder. It does not, it simply doesn't. And so, you know, these are part of the many reasons why we have been needing something like this. And to me, it's really unbelievable how the parole system has been able to function for so long and gotten away with these really, really horrifying things that they've been doing to people. And so, you know, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Alicia, but I think we can go into just discussing a little bit more about less is more now, right? Then we can dig into that.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for all the folks that have shared and particularly around, about the stories of substance abuse. I'm a recovering addict for almost 5 years now. And it has made a world of possibilities to change within my life. And so less is more. I never got violated for a substance abuse problem. Not because I wanted to listen to parole, but because of the fact that prison put the fear in me that I didn't want to go back. And so having these protections that are available for substance abuse and people who deal with a mental health illness, and how this bill is super crucial. But I definitely think, it is time let's get to the details. Like, what, I know there was something dropped in the chat, like, what's the details that we're going to about this bill? So if the folks that are on parole have loved ones on parole, what is the information we know that we can bring to them? And so you want to kick us off on the specific details of the bill and how we can fight back if the parole officer does act up, because they always do. So Anthony, you're going to take the lead.
Yeah, I just want to respond to one of the questions that were in the chat. That's all right with you, Melanie. It was about the disinformation that was given about person with a sex offense. Now this is happening all over the state of New York. I know from in my office, they are telling people that, but it is not true. Everybody that doesn't matter what offense they have, they are entitled to everything under less is more. The only thing that they could become violated and get the extra time for is if they can prove that whatever violation could have led into another incident offense. Also, I am a sex offender, so I'm dealing with a lot of this myself. But they know I work on this campaign, so they're not really screwing with me so much, because they already know I know about this, but they are, and I've had to tell people about it. They do lie detector tests, but that's separately, and that is to find out whether the person is doing what they're supposed to be doing, and if their restrictions need to be tighter or loosened a little bit more. It's kind of a very unfair system because they can't even be produced in court, but it's just the nature of the beast. And but I hope I answered that question to the best.
Yeah, thank you so much, Anthony, for that. I think that was a really great way to answer the question that was asked, and we can get more into it later on. But as AJ shared, less is more got signed into law by Governor Hochul last year. So it was in September of last year. And when she signed the bill, she ordered the release of 191 people who were detained at Rikers Island for a technical parole violation, right? And the same thing happened across the states. In other jails, people were released because of less is more. And, there were some provisions of the bill that she implemented the moment she signed less is more, but there were some discrepancies with it, like where we saw that docs wasn't necessarily abiding by it to the T, like the way that the law was intended. And so, there was this whole momentum for us to push Governor Hochul to really make sure that docs is abiding by the provisions that she implemented immediately. But then also there was a big push for her to just implement it ahead of its effective date. And so, there was a big fight there. And then just to add more numbers to it, as of January 2022, there have been 1,460 warrants for technical parole violations that have been lifted. And also by that time period, there have been 420 people who have been released from Rikers Island and 423 people that have been released from local jails across the state. And so, you know, this honestly, like, this is like something really, really big to celebrate. Like, because of less is more, people are getting a chance to go home. People are getting a chance to be in their communities like they should have been to begin with. And so, like I said, the bill was signed into law on September 2021. Some of the sanctions, 2 provisions went into effect, and that's like the eliminating the use of incarceration for certain technical parole violations, and then also capping the periods of incarceration for more serious violations. Now, as of last week, March 1st, that marked the actual effective date of the legislation, which is like a big, big thing. And I'll just get into the provisions, because by March 1st, most of the provisions of less is more were implemented, with the exception of a few. So I'll get into it once we go through the provisions, and I explain them a little bit more. So the first component is eliminating the use of incarceration for non-criminal technical parole violations, like being late for curfew, like using alcohol. The only way that you will still be subjected to being incarcerated for using alcohol is if the person is on parole due to a conviction for driving under the influence of alcohol. And the same goes for using other types of drugs. And then another one is like failing to notify a parole officer of a change in employment or program. So these are all of the things that people will no longer be incarcerated for. And in addition, also failing to report to a parole officer within the 24 hours of being released from prison, failing to pay surcharges and fee, obtaining a driver's license, or driving a car with a valid driver's license. Now, the only exception to this one in particular is if the action is explicitly prohibited because of the person's original conviction. Another one is failing to notify a parole officer of contact with any law enforcement agencies unless the person is intended to hide illegal behavior. Now, that's pretty much like most of the technical parole violations that will no longer be subjected to incarceration. And like Anthony said at the beginning, if a person is on parole for a sex offense, and the parole officer can demonstrate that any violations that I mentioned any of those violations is related to preventing another sex offense. And so in that circumstance, the violations will be treated as a non-technical violation and will be subjected to incarceration. And so I'm going to pause here because I know that was a lot, but I just wanted to kind of make sure to give all the examples of violations that will no longer be eligible for incarceration. But if anybody has questions, like Alicia said, put it in the chat and we'll definitely get to them. Now, another component of the bill is that it sets limits on periods of incarceration for more serious violations, right? And so certain technical parole violations could still result in jail time, but they will be capped at a maximum of 30 days. And then also it's broken down. So if it's your first or second violation, you will receive 0 days of incarceration. If it's your third violation, you would receive 7 days. And if it's your fourth, 15. And then if it's your fifth violation, you receive 30 days. But like I said, it would be capped at 30 days. So if you do another violation after your fifth, then again, that would be 30 days. Now, absconding is a little bit different. And as many of you might know, absconding is defined as intentionally avoiding supervision by failing to maintain contact with the assigned parole officer. And so for this one, if you are absconding, if it's your first violation of absconding, you will be subjected to receiving 7 days of incarceration. If it's your second violation, 15 days, and then if it's your third, 30 days. And so that's kind of how it's been broken down for the more serious violations, right? And so another component of the bill is that it basically ends automatic detention based on the mere accusation of a technical parole violation, and it bolsters due process. So for everyone on parole, you will no longer be automatically detained when accused of a parole violation. And so everyone will be appointed a lawyer to represent them at parole revocation hearings. And the timing of those hearings have been reduced from 105 days to 35 days for people who are detained. And then for people who are in the community, those hearings must be conducted within 55 days. And then like a big part of this is also that all the revocation hearings will be conducted in courthouses rather than in jails, which is how it has been functioning for the longest. And I'm sure you all know this, like doing this increases transparency. It makes sure that witnesses have easier access to attend them, family members, and of course the public. And so that's a big win. And then for people who are accused of a technical parole violation, they will essentially be given a written notice of the violation with the date of the hearing and the location. Basically, it would be like an appearance ticket, and they will remain at liberty in the community to attend those hearings. And then I believe it was Kendra that mentioned, like in New York City, people who were accused of a violation were automatically detained and taken to Rikers Island to await their hearing. So this is a huge contrast. And then for those who are on parole, you know, they, like I mentioned, they will no longer be incarcerated automatically just because of the mere accusation of a violation. Now, to the one that I know everyone like loves to hear a little bit more about is the earned time credits. And Kendra did mention a little bit about what it does. And so basically for every 30 days in the community that an individual spends without violating their parole conditions, they earned a 30-day credit reduction on their overall parole time sentence. And like Kendra says, this gives folks the opportunity to cut their parole sentence in half. And then also in addition, for this component of the bill, there's a retroactive piece. So people are eligible to earn up to 2 years of retroactive credit the minute that this provision goes into effect. And this is the one provision that did not go into effect on March 1st of this year, but basically docs is being given until September 1st to fully implement the earned time credits piece and award individuals their credits. And so that's a little bit about what the less is more bill is intended to do. There's a lot more to it, but I covered like the gist of it. And so I'm going to pause here to see if anybody has any questions, or if Kendra, AJ, Alicia, Anthony, if any of you have anything more to add that I didn't capture.
I would just I'd just like to mention that in addition to all of these things that are happening for people that could use a second chance, another way to look in light of this is the old system was like, for a person with substance use disorder would be so afraid to say to their parole officer, to their counselor, that they had relapsed, and out of fear they wouldn't be able to get the treatment they needed, and people were actually dying from overdoses this way. So this also falls in line with the thinking of risk reduction, where a person can go to their parole officer with a carefree attitude almost and say, hey, look, I need some extra help, and not have to worry about being tossed into a jail cell for 2 years. And this, in effect, will save lives. So I just wanted to point that out as well.
Yeah, and I think for me, just re-hitting on, you know, what she said around that 30-day. So it doesn't go into effect until September 1st, but it's 2 years retroactive. So don't lose your time on that. You know, like come September 1st, if you've been on parole for 2 years and you've never received a violation, you should be getting a year reduction automatically off top of parole. And again, you know, really reiterating that there are providers and attorneys and anyone else that can help you. I know it's a very messy situation to go tell your parole officer, this is the law, right? So we're going to be doing a lot of advocacy and work with you guys around that.
Yeah, also, you know, what I was aware of too, right? My last time on parole, right? That I did not know prior, that you can actually, if you didn't have no violations, you've been doing your parole successfully, you can go and ask for early release from parole. You can ask, you know what I mean? It's no reason why you should be denied of it, because I took a chance and I asked my parole officer and I was granted it. So I didn't do my whole parole, my whole years that I had on parole. I had an early release. I did a year and I had 3, and I only did a year on it. And it's doable. You know, like Anthony said, it's the fear of even going to your parole officer, because how it has designed, you know, the parole officers had made it so fearful for you to come even ask the questions, because we realized that, you know, there's no resources. They never even say, oh, here, this is what you can do. If you complete a year of parole, we can get you off. They don't even tell you that. They do not say anything, and it's there. It's one of the rules. You can actually get off parole early if you're being consistent with doing your time without a violation. You can get off parole. So do not be afraid. And I will tell anybody, do not be afraid to go to your parole officer and ask for an early release. What they're going to do is say, I have to submit the documents. So if they say they can't do it, say, where's the documents? Because, you know, I'm making you guys aware that there's paperwork they can submit to give you an early release.
I have a question. I was wondering that 2 of my friends got early release just yesterday, and I congratulate them. You know, it was crazy. One was up in Albany, one was here in the Bronx. You know, he came, he used to go to NICAT and everything when it was back then. And I told him he was going to get it because he only had like 14 months left, because I feel they're doing steps on your time, how much time you got left. And those are the people they're taking care of first.
Absolutely.
Now, yeah, I wanted to get a better understanding is they have until September.
Mm-hmm.
Are they only giving you a year off, even if you've been home 5 years with no ifs, ands, or buts?
So yeah, so sounds good. So let me just answer your question. So there have been, like you mentioned, there have been people that have been released due to less is more as of yesterday, and those cases have been moving. 2 of our members got released yesterday, which we were really happy about. And so when it comes to the September 1st deadline to the earned time credits, is like essentially what that means is that by then they should have awarded everyone their credits with no excuses. And so the rollouts might be happening earlier, which we're seeing that they are, which is great. But by then, like, it should be fully awarded. Now, to your other piece, for the retroactive credits, you only get up to 2 years of retroactive. So let's say it's September 1st, and you, like you mentioned, you've been on parole for 5 years. You only get 2 retroactive years of those 5 years, meaning that however many years you have left, you take 2 years off that once September 1st hits. Is that clear? Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, that's more clear. I thought it was just a little bit of time it was taking. I thought they was if you've been home 5, they met you like almost half or something like that. I didn't get a full understanding on how much they gave you on by September. If it's only 2 years, then they're gonna.
That's right. Just 2 years of retroactive, and then moving forward, you're eligible for the 30 for 30. Which will essentially, that's like another way to get off, to cut your sentence even further.
Right.
Yeah.
So then if you got the 30-30 along with that, the 2 years, you put in the 30-30. So then that puts additional.
Yep, that's right. So let's say, let's make it a little bit more simple. So let's say you've been on parole, like you said, for 5 years. September 1st hits, you get your retroactive credits. And that's 2 years of retroactive credit. But let's say that by September, you actually had maybe, let's say, 4 years left to just finish your parole term sentence. And so those 4 years, you take away the 2 years, that leaves you with 2 years left, right, of parole. Then moving forward, that means like moving forward with the 30 for 30, if you have no violations moving forward for like a whole year, you're done by that year. And so you don't have to do the 2 years that I mentioned that you had left, but you're done by that one.
Is it automatic or you have to put in for it?
that's automatic. And that's the one thing that I did want to add to it, because if you remember what AJ was saying about another alternative of early release and how the parole system needs to like do the documents and everything, with less is more, the earned time credits is not up to the discrepancy. This is really separate. Like everyone, the calculations are going to be set forward, and it's not like any paperwork that needs to be submitted. It's like, this is what you're due. This is your time. This is the system that we're functioning now.
Okay, thank you.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
It feels good.
Robert has a question. Yes, can your parole officer submit someone for early parole release without informing you? Yes, they can. They can submit documents to have you relieved from parole. They can do that. And kudos to that parole officer. That means you got a good parole officer who thought enough of you to get you released, because there are some good ones out there. But yes, they can submit the documents without informing you and then come back and tell you you're off parole. This has nothing to do with the less is more bill, just overall, this is what can happen.
I got a question.
I have a related question. Just to be absolutely clear, when they say it's retroactive for 2 years, does the 30 for 30 apply to those 2 years? So you really only get off, if I owe 5 years, does it become 3 years that I owe, or only 4 because it's 30 for 30?
So basically, Robert, the minute that, let's say the September 1st implementation date for the earned time credits, once you're there, that on that day, or like we mentioned, like people are being awarded even sooner than that day, you're going to be given the 2 years retroactive credit, right? So no one can touch that. That's like something that you banked in prior to the bill being implemented. That's like in the past, right? So those 2 years you have banked in if you had no violations prior to the bill, that provision being fully implemented on September 1st. Then on September 1st, moving forward, let's say you banked in those 2 years of retroactive credit, but you're still not done. Like that still doesn't set you for like your parole time sentence to be completely done. Then moving forward, the 30 for 30 is something that you're going to be looking forward to. It's something that applies to the rest of your time. And the earned time credits piece, no problem, Robert, no problem. And I hope that was clear. I'm going to pause here just in case it wasn't, and I can figure out a different way to go about it.
I got a question though.
Give me 1 second, Theodore. I was just going to answer the question on lifetime parole.
Well, I got the same type of question.
Okay, got you. Go for it then, Theodore.
All right, so I've been part of Katal. I mean, I haven't really been around much dealing with my own mental health and stuff, but my max out date is May 23rd, 2022 from parole. I've called docs like 6 times and they're being snarky, rude. Just they tell me to be patient, it's under review. And so I just like people like me, we pretty much get screwed.
So like I mentioned earlier, under less is more, docs, it's supposed to prioritize those that would already be done with parole by June. And that includes people that are going to be done by May. Yeah, exactly. And so, but with that being said, there's a lot of discrepancies in place where we're seeing that they're not abiding by that. And so it's really up to, exactly. And so
I did really, all 5 years with no violation, nothing. And I've called them. I just called them 2 days ago and I asked them and I said, nobody's giving me any answers. And like, I just want my freedom back. And like, what do I have to do? Like, how are you rolling this out? Like, is it going by DIN number? Is it going by time left? Is it like alphabetical order, you know? So like I sit every day and I call my parole officer and I'm like, am I done? Like
Theodore. I feel that your phone call's coming because like I told him earlier, my friend he had 14 more months.
Yeah.
You're less than that. And your phone call's coming. Stay off my suggestion, stay off the phone. It's there. You're good because you're already off.
Yeah.
According
that's what I'm trying to carry my life about. Like, all right, I'm gonna do what I gotta do, you know?
just live your life, because your phone call's already there. It's just that nobody's doing their job completely. I feel personally that
They're not.
they're getting around to it, but you're less than what my friend had, and he got a call yesterday. So your call is, to me, is right around the corner. Because if I had May of 2022, I'll be booking tickets to the islands somewhere to go party, because it's your time. You know, you live your life. Don't get discrepant. Don't nag them. Don't do that, because your time is right there. March,
I'd like
April,
to,
May, 2 months. You know, you're good. You're good.
I appreciate that, brother.
Yeah.
I'd like to further go into just responding, like, they got up until May to like get the people that are getting off first to get off, and they're due to let almost probably over 8,000 people go that need to be get off. I know a friend of mine across the hall. I live in a rooming house in Buffalo. I get this every day. I got 2 people that should be getting off of parole almost nearly immediately. The guy across the hall was told not to show up for his next parole date, and to show up another date, and they'll talk about release. So people are getting off. It's just taking time. You know how Doc says it's but you can always go to any legal aid bureau or whatever free legal service you have in your area, and they also can point you and help you get off as well. So if you have too much trouble, just get a hold of a lawyer and light a fire under their asses, so to speak.
Well, like, I feel better now because I have PTSD from being incarcerated for so long. I did almost 7 years between 2 bids, and finally to have some answers on, like, instead of racking my brain with what ifs, like, I really appreciate all the help with it, because I just want my life. I did almost 5 years without any violations, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're doing good. You're doing real good.
Thank you, everyone, for that support and just answering Theodore's question. But I did want to add to it, like, Docs is a system that we do not trust. And so part of the fight that we are now is making sure that they are effectively and fully implementing less is more. And so, like, that's part of the piece of, like, holding them accountable to it. And so the fight doesn't end where, like, okay, less is more, all the provisions are implemented. The fight continues to make sure that they are actually abiding by the rule, by the law. And so that's something that we're in right now. And then also to just further answer your question, Theodore, like, we are starting to see docs kind of give people their earn time credits and get people discharged. But they're kind of using the fact that September 1st is actually the implementation date of that earn time provision as a way to kind of not give everyone fully. That's not to say that they aren't, but it's just like, again, we don't trust these systems. And so we just got to hold them accountable to it. Now, for the earn time credits piece, there was a question in the chat of someone asking whether or not it applied to people who are on lifetime parole. And unfortunately, it doesn't. And it's just like a lot of pieces to it, because it's really hard to kind of calculate time when you're on lifetime parole, and like it's really difficult. So it isn't. But like AJ said, there are other alternatives for early discharge that people on life parole can apply for. And
There's another one.
Yeah, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, someone in the chat put it here. How do people get off 2 years who were released early this month? I thought that it not affect till September. It goes back to what I was saying. It had nothing to do with the less is more bill. Sometimes, you can get an early release, has nothing to do with the less is more bill. If your parole feel like, you can be released based on your, you have no violations, while on parole, you can be released without the September 1st less is more bill being active. You still can be released early from parole.
Yeah, and then
in fact, in New York City,
New York City.
In fact, in New York City, that happens all the time. People
Correct.
are released from parole all the time. 10 years ago, I was released from parole early. Like, It's very common that your parole officer, if you're doing what's right, they're not going to usually in New York City, at least, keep you for the full time. So I know that's vastly different upstate, but just know
Right.
that that's a very common thing in New York City.
Thank you, Kendra, that part.
Oh, yeah, and I wanted to say something about, it is somebody said something, hold on one second. Yeah, everything, that the less is more covers, like, it doesn't matter the offense, they're still getting, everything that the bill includes. So the only thing that doesn't include is if somebody's on lifetime parole, they can't get the 30 for 30, but everything else applies to everybody on supervision, whether they're on medical supervision or post supervision or regular parole. Another thing I seen a question in here I didn't want to get back to was whether it was a technical parole violation for not completing a program out here that's required. Docs can still do that, and unfortunately, what goes on more times than any, and it's the most frustrating thing that they do, and in my mind, is they will make you do these programs upstate, and they won't even let you out on your earliest time release unless you finish the programs. But then when you get out, they're making you take the same exact programs that you completed successfully, and you have to do them over again. And what I've had a problem with on my parole is what docs likes to do is they like to jam all of your programs down your throat at one time, making you go to counseling 5 times a week. And really, as hard as it is to say, I had to put my foot down and draw a line in the sand and say, hey, I have to do these programs. I'm going to do them sequentially, 1 at a time or 2 at a time, and not be overwhelmed by the counseling, because it's a fact. If you don't complete a program or you decide to not go to it anymore, it isn't a technical violation. It's a non-criminal technical, and it could count against your time credits. It sucks, but it's just, again, it's the nature of the beast.
And do we, I see there's a couple of groups in here. Does anyone in the group have anyone in the groups that are on the screen have a particular question? I know it's been hard to see the chat from inside the group. So is anyone in the groups, you can
Okay.
raise your hand. If anyone is in the big groups, if you have a question.
Hey, there we go. Oh, right here. Okay. Right there. I'm right here.
Please.
Yeah. Well, I was incarcerated from 2018 to 2021. I made my parole board on 2020 of July, and I wasn't released until a year and 3 months after that, due to a technicality based on the pandemic happening. And there was a misdemeanor in Pennsylvania. It wasn't, a couple months or something like that. But the thing that I'm trying to understand is, because you guys say that 2 years prior, you're supposed to get credit for it. What happens if you were supposed to be on parole earlier? Is that something I would be able to fight and be like, hey, I was supposed to be released on this date, but I wasn't. I should have had my, I should have had my time for that. Because the facility messed up in that sense. So I'm trying to see if that's something I could actually go ahead and try and argue that I should have that time compensation, already counted towards.
Got it. Thank you for that question. And when it comes to less is more, for the earned time credits piece, if you were incarcerated for that, whatever time period it was, then you won't be eligible to have those credits be accounted for and given, right? And I'm not too sure, like that particular case is like really specific to you. And so my suggestion would be like definitely getting in contact with one of the lawyers, and kind of like having that legal advice be given to you, which I personally cannot because I'm not a lawyer, But like we mentioned earlier, we do have those types of resources. We have the Legal Aid Society, who has a whole parole revocation unit, and they will be able to attend to your particular case. And I'm going to put my email in the chat just so that you all have it. And if you need some legal assistance, I can connect you to some of the lawyers that we have on, that are part of our coalition and have been working on making sure that people's cases are being heard.
Thank you.
I have a
Right.
question.
Mhm.
Melanie.
Please answer.
So,
Yeah, please ask your question. Sorry. Yeah, no, it's
so my parole, I'm getting off in September. So, I completed two programs already. I still have to do Lexington, which is a drug treatment program, and a domestic violence program, which is Clearwater. I've never had a domestic violence case in my life. I've never put my hand on a family member or even a female. So when my parole officer brought it up to me, I was confused about it and I asked her about it. And she said she just seen it on my file and that I have to go and at least do the intake. But then I just got a phone call just now saying Clearwater called me and was like, yeah, your parole officer wants you to go through with this program. I get off soon. I have 3 jobs right now that I can't even do. I don't have time to go to this program that isn't going to benefit me at all. I've never been in a domestic violence situation. So I would like any advice that you guys have for me about how to handle this. I don't want to get violated. I just came back out. I'm on the right path right now. Yeah.
I could probably give you an answer on that one, and you're not gonna like it though.
Okay.
You're gonna have to eat that program. It's probably like a 12-week program, once a week for 12 weeks. The best thing to do as far as those programs go, because they're they're only 2 to 3 months, once a week. Just get it over and done with and move on, because they can really make your life miserable not doing these programs. And just it sucks, man. I'm actually doing a lot of programs over again. I've been in group counseling for almost over a year and a half, and I got thrown out of the counseling place I went to. Nothing I did counted. So I had to restart everything over again, except this time I explained to them that I needed to do it one at a time, and that it was overwhelming to me to have to do it all at once. So I'm sorry I couldn't give you a better answer. Maybe somebody else can, but it sucks.
So
Okay, I'll jump in. I'll jump in and give you an answer to that. So I have had my brother has been convicted of a violent crime. So he had to do programs based on his violent crime. They tried to get him to do a drug program, right? Which he didn't have a drug issue, right? He fought it and he didn't have to do it. What he did, he went to the senior parole officer, he talked with them, he's explained to him, he's had them say, like, look at my history, it has nothing to do with drugs. And he was fortunate that they looked at it and they removed the drug program from him, and all he had to do was do the violent program. So sometimes you may have to go over the officer's head, your parole officer's head overall, and speak to the senior parole officer. Yeah, they may get upset, but you're doing what you need to do for yourself, and explain to them, like, this is not what I've been convicted of. I don't understand why I have to do it. Plus, I'm still trying to provide for myself and my family, and I can't do it during the program based on something I didn't do. And 9 times out of 10, I probably wouldn't even relate to, because I never done the crime. So sometimes we got to be our own voice, and speak up, because if we don't, they won't know and they can't hear us, and we won't get the help unless we ask for it.
And I think I'll just add to that too. If you're in Poughkeepsie, are you in Poughkeepsie or no?
yes.
Oh, perfect. So Exodus runs the Dutchess County Reentry Task Force. So in the city, we also run the Manhattan, the New York County Reentry Task Force. And we have that happen all the time in the city, where my coordinator will come to me and he'll say, look, this is what they want them to do. We've met with them. They don't need that. They need these. other pieces, right? And so that's when the coordinator will have a conversation with the parole officer, and they can maybe help you navigate. Exodus runs the Dutchess County Reentry Task Force as well. So Carlos and Jamel and all the staff that are on site at Exodus, they could maybe sit with you and work, to have that conversation with your parole officer. And then if she doesn't still do something, that's when I would take it over her head. Because, then you have also people that were sitting with you and that also witnessed. So then that way, if the, senior person or whatever starts getting upset, you can say like, look, we had staff that sat with us also and heard the same things from the parole officer. We went through it with her. She was not willing to budge. This is not on my record at all. And it is impacting my ability to be employed and all those other things, right? Like it does impact that. So, now we're taking it to you. So definitely whatever other resources you can utilize, but make sure you talk to like the Exodus coordinator for the task force. His name's Carlos. And he might even already know who your parole officer is and could make a phone call and make it be easier that way than,
Hey, is Exodus in around Buffalo as well? Yeah, anything like that?
No. But isn't CCA or Osborne? Who's the one that's by Buffalo? One of them is up there. I know there's
I
a
think it's
program up
CCA.
there. CCA. Center for Community Alternatives is what CCA stands for.
Hey, I want to
Yeah,
thank you
just
guys
not
for your
looking at
advice. Thank you.
I might need that same kind of advice. Thank you for that.
And
So,
do we have any,
Uh,
sorry, do we have any more questions? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I have a question. You're doing the programs that somebody spoke earlier. You did them upstate. You completed them officially. Everything. They bring you home. They still have you doing these programs. I myself completed all the programs, as the gentleman was saying earlier. Domestic. I never had none of these things, but I was informed through my PO at the time that when you want to move in with your partner, you want to do something, some of these certificates can help you better yourself while you're on parole, instead of just not having those certificates, because when you're ready to move forward, a lot of things can hold you back. But my thing is, I finished all of that, but there's like the aftercare programs that you do, and I tell them, when does this thing end? And you're doing it completion, you're doing it 100%. Now I'm every 3 months, every 4 months, like that. So what is the drag out in this, and why do they keep it going? And you're applying, you've done everything, housing and everything. I mean, when does this thing end?
I don't understand it either. And I'll tell you what, through the years of my life, I've been, I was sexually molested when I was a young kid, and I had a rape situation that happened to me when I was drunk one night and over high. So I explained this to my counselor and said, I've completed the SOP program twice before, and this is a traumatizing program because now I have to revisit everything that's ever happened to me on a daily basis. And they just pretty much told me, oh, well, deal with it. And that's kind of, I need some help with my programs too.
May I just ask a question real quick? The less is more, how does it apply to those who are on parole for life?
Yeah,
It
that's a
doesn't.
good question. So less is more does apply to people that are on lifetime parole. The only carve out comes out to the earned time credits. That's the only provision that doesn't apply to them. But if you're on lifetime parole, you will no longer be subjected to being re-incarcerated for these non-criminal technical parole violations. You have access to the Bolster and due process where it provides speedy hearings, all of that. So everything we spoke about today applies to people on lifetime parole. The only exception is the earned time credits.
Thank you for answering that in more detail.
No problem.
I see Alyssa, is that house? Alyssa Sanchez just had her hand up.
Oh, we just answered it. I'm going to take it down. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions? I'm gonna call you all the Jamal Massey room. I don't know where you're at right now. Any questions from that room? Or from Tommy's room? Anyone have any questions?
No, we're clear here. Thank you for the option.
No.
Got one more question.
Yeah, please ask him.
So if somebody has been on parole they have 5 years of parole, right? And then let's say they get out, they do a year and a half, then they get a violation. Let's say it was a technical violation. Let's say they were smoking weed or something. I don't know, curfew, whatever technical violation is. Does that reset the 30 for 30?
Good question.
So a person can't earn time credits while incarcerated, but the year and a half he did come out and do well, that does count. So that should be doubled up for him per 2-year credit, post credits. So yeah, he'll get counted for the time he did out before the violation. But I hope that answered your question.
Well,
And
Yeah.
so you'll have, yeah, I was just gonna add to that. So like you would have all this earned time credit that you've already earned, right? That gets taken off. Now I get violated for a violation. So now I would need to be back out 30 days again before I get another 30 days off, right? So it doesn't take away any of the earned time that you already had. And all it does is, like, say I get violated on day 27, I'm not gonna get 30 days of good time for that 30 days. I'm gonna have to wait now until the next 30-day period. Does that make sense?
it does. They just don't. I just was asking that because one thing I know that they do is, let's say you have a year and a half. Let's say, like for me, I did 8 years. All right, so I had a year and a half, let's say, good time. So I know that if you have a violation, they automatically add that good time to your parole. So if I had 5 years, now I have 5 years and a year and a half on parole. So now, does that still happen? And then the other thing is, well, can we just start out there first? Does that still, do they still give you your good time? I'm sure they do, right?
Yeah, once you earn time credits, you can't lose them.
Say that one more time.
Once you have earned time credits, you cannot lose them afterwards. They are yours. So if you earn them, you can't lose them.
I did 5 years, and when I got out, I think I did 4.5 years on parole out of the 5. I did 5 years. No, excuse me. I had 5 years flat. I did 4 years, 2 months out of the 5 years. I did 4.5 years on the 5 years post. I was almost done with parole. All of a sudden, my parole officer starts getting buggy about, oh, you're driving, this, that, and third. So they try to give me a violation. When I was going to the meeting, they told me, oh, I see you have a year and 3 months for parole left. I said, what are you talking about? I got 6 months left. Oh, no, you don't. You have a year and, 3 months left, because when you have a violation, we give you your first violation, we give you your parole time, your good time from when you was locked up because you got out early. So you saying they don't do that anymore?
So what it sounds like to me is that they stopped your parole time when you were violated. That's what it sounded like they did for you to have more time added on. If you had said you had 6 months and now you got a year and a half.
Right, and they're saying that the extra time was for the good time I had, because I never violated on the 5 years. I did 4 years, 2 months. So they gave me the 8 months on top of the rest of the time I had left, which was 6 months. You get me?
Because you had post-release. You're not on parole. You were on post-release, correct?
Correct.
That's why, because post-release, that's why. There's the difference.
There we go.
Post-release can do that. But moving forward, I would still think we'd be able to fight that under less is more, but that was so long ago that's why they did that. That's how post-release works. If you get violated on post-release, you lose all that good time because you got out on your CR date. So you lose the time from your CR to your max, right? So
Right.
that's a completely different system. Post-release, even though it's under parole, it is vastly different than actual parole.
So less is
They're
more.
two
is not-
separate things.
Less is more is not the same. It doesn't. So if you're on post release,
Less is more will count under both now, parole, post-release, all of it. But with your situation, we'd have to get into the nitty-gritty. I don't know. It should be retroactive in my book. So you should be able to, like, they should give you more good time for all the years that you were on post-release that you didn't violate. So they should just take that right back off. I would definitely fight that, but that's why they're doing that under the post-release law, not the less is more law
right? Okay.
of what they did to you.
All right.
But I would still fight that because less is more does count for post-release now as well.
Right.
So you should be getting the good time from all those 4.5 years that you were out on parole and didn't do any violations.
Right. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Is there any more questions?
I didn't catch the Melanie email.
I'll put it again in the chat. I got you, Paul.
Okay.
Also, if you guys have any questions, you can always email me. I put my email in the chat. Also, I have a YouTube channel that goes over every part of the law into detail. And I put the link to my YouTube channel in the chat too. I can put it in there again if you need to.
And we have a question from Tommy's room.
Struggling to unmute myself. So Dwayne here has a question.
Okay, hello. Good afternoon. My question is, let's say if when you're on parole and like, let's say the parole officer may forget or something, but like if you had police contact, but you have the good time, all good time, but you just have police contact, and it may not be for something very serious, but they forget that you may have 3 months, but they end up adding 6 more months because you have police contact. Is that an unfair concept to
When you say police contact, are you meaning I talked to an officer, I reported something to an officer, or like were you in handcuffs? Is that the kind of police contact you're talking about, or just I talked to an officer?
Okay, no,
Transitional community, Tommy speaking. How may I help you?
I'm sorry. I'm saying like if you had police contact, you're not in handcuffs or anything, just the officer may have talked to you about something or something had happened. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. And yeah, that should not be any kind of violation at all. To just talk to a police officer or them ask you a question. If they did not put you in handcuffs, that's not police contact then. Like if they did not put you in handcuffs and arrest you, that's not police contact. We can call the police and report things. We can ask officers questions. I think parole gets very confused on what police contact means, and they abuse their discretion in that way. But I'm here to tell you that no, they should not be giving you 6 months or any kind of months because you had quote unquote police contact where you weren't arrested or charged with anything. You just had a conversation with them. And if that is happening, definitely, connect with the Exodus office upstate so they can connect you to an attorney that can help you with that.
Because I hear sometimes, some of the people, they get police contact and and parole may add time to it because something may have happened, like a fire or something, and they were inside the building.
Yeah, that's abuse of parole's discretion. And that you should definitely talk, like the people that that's happening to, they should definitely be talking to attorneys because that is an absolute abuse. They cannot do that.
Okay, because you know, again, stuff do happen, and people, you know, end up getting set up or pushed behind because of certain situations, like I was asking, like maybe a fire could have happened inside the building. The police comes, you know, of course, and they're asking questions. But being that you're on parole, you know, they could say, oh, well, you have police contacts and you didn't tell us anything about it. So we're going to violate you, you know. So, and it's hard to really determine what type of idea. So I wanted to ask. I know it sounds like a crazy complex
Well, it's
question.
sad that it happens, and it happens a lot. I've had people that have been victimized and were too scared to call the cops because they were on parole, and then that would be considered police contact. That is absolutely absurd. And if that is happening to anybody, like, please let us know immediately, because we will help you get an attorney. We will help fight parole. That's absolutely absurd, but it does happen more than what people think.
And then, please continue.
And then sometimes, you know, police may clearly just say it's just questioning. We just questioned, you know, what was going on. You know, we're questioning. It wasn't no arrest or anything like that. You know, if the police vouch for you, and parole still turns it around, I mean, it's like, would that actually be fair to those who are on parole?
No.
And so when we look at, you know, we look at the system, and I think that within this room, there's the recognition that the system is broken, and the Newburgh Center, Exodus, Katal, little bit of a little piece of light is or organizations that have contacts that can support in situations, because, you know, I know the risk of going through parole and having to ask certain questions and to be able to like fight back and what that looks like, because unfortunately it is very real for parole officers to set you up for various different things, and the parole system parole officers not following the law. And so just to be mindful of people's times, because I want to respect everybody's time. I'm going to pass it off to our speakers to give some final thoughts. And if folks can please drop their email in the chat, if folks can give the email if you're in a larger group room to the person coordinating it. We're going to send you all, if you would like, a recording of the video and plus an additional information, like everything that we went over. Along with various context information on how you can reach out to organizations, reach out to our organizations that are like ours, to advocate for you in various different situations. And so, Robert, I see your hand.
Oh, okay. Could I add one thing to what Tommy was saying? Just quickly, while I was away, I was watching the news, and it showed the story of on the 7 train, a woman fell on the tracks and a guy on the other side jumped down on the tracks, walked over to her, helped her back on the platform, went back to where he was and ran away. And the first thought that came to me was, that guy is probably on parole and he doesn't want to have parole contact, even for saving a life. So that's how absurd these laws are, and our misunderstanding of them are. I just wanted to share that.
Absolutely. So I'm going to take this time and I'm going to pass it off to Melanie to kick us off with our closing thoughts before we head out of here for the rest of the day.
Thank you so much, Alicia, and thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. You know, one thing that I do want to stress is how important it is to continue to disseminate this information, like educate your peers on the impact of less is more. Really use the resources that we put in the chat, the ones that we're going to be following up with, to continue to educate the community, because there is going to be instances where, like dogs, you know, these systems are set up for us to fail. And so these, you know, we cannot trust them. So it's really important for us to be fully aware of, you know, what our rights are. And so that's why it's going to be important to be tuned into the campaign, tuned into what the bill does. And so please do stay connected. I put my email in the chat. You also have my phone number. Definitely use me as a resource. Thank you. And I'll pass it over to Anthony.
I'd like to just piggyback on that is, you know, there's going to be lots of disinformation out there. Look what happened to Bell Reforms, and it's being constantly attacked left and right. So, and unity will prevail. We need to still come together. Katal has a great action tool to go to. It's to implement less more quickly, but also when you go to that action tool and they get these emails, they can say, all right, we're still getting strong support from the public on why this is important to keep, because there's gonna be people out there that will discredit us every step of the way, even if the system is working 100% perfectly. So again, I left my email in my phone number, and I also left my YouTube where I explain in a lot of less is more in more detail. And also I have we have an info session we did on Instagram Live where we answered the most commonly asked questions. So if you can, just slide over there if you need anything. Me and Melanie are always here to take questions, and just let us know.
Thank you, Anthony. And then, yep, take it away, Ken.
Sorry, I was gonna pass it right over to AJ. AJ.
Oh, AJ, there you go. Thank you.
Final thoughts?
Oh, okay. So we want to thank everybody for coming out, join us in this info session. You know, we have many more to come. Like Melanie said, you know, I put my email in the chat as well. You can feel free to reach out to us. You know, if any questions, you know, we have the resources. If we can't answer directly, get you out the answers you need. So thank you everyone for coming out.
But I think this is Kendra again. My final thoughts, same, right? Just community. There is going to be a lot of confusion, like they talked about earlier with disinformation. A lot of that will be coming from parole. Utilize the community that you're in, and us that are on this call. We are here to help. Thank you for all joining.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks. We hope you enjoy the rest of the day, and we look forward to being in community with you in the future. Thank you, folks, and we all hope to see from you soon. And please feel free to reach out if you have any questions, anything like that. We definitely appreciate you being here today.